important issues, political or social issues that are going on in the country where the story takes place. So in this case, the sleuth is named Jim Jaree, that's Jim with 2 M's, and she is a 30-something crime reporter who worked for the Chiang Mai newspaper. Chiang Mai is the second largest city in Thailand, and it's kind of in the north of the country in the mountains. Jim has a lot of unfulfilled aspirations, let's put it that way. She has a very wry sense of humor. As an example of the brief time that she spent studying abroad, she says, "I wanted to go to an English-speaking country, but they were all full, so they sent me to Australia. And by the time I'd worked out what they were saying, it was time to come home." Her family is lovably dysfunctional. She has an eccentric and very domineering mother, little Thai woman, who insists on moving the entire family down south to run the Gulf Bay Lovely Resort and Restaurant, which is most definitely not lovely. It's a dump. It's in the middle of nowhere on the beach in southern Thailand. Jim has one brother who is totally obsessed with bodybuilding. She has another brother who is a retired, she's a transgender, transitioning former beauty queen, retired beauty queen, who also happens to have a conveniently useful genius for internet hacking, which comes in handy at some points in the story. Her grandfather is a retired cop who hardly ever says anything, but he loves to ride shotgun when the time is right, and she needs his help. So now that she's living in the middle of nowhere in the sticks, she's convinced that her life, particularly her career, is just at a dead end. Until one day when an old VW van, which was buried underground, it's unearthed, and they discover 2 bodies inside from the 1970s. And to make things worse, at roughly the same time, a little bit later, the abbot from the Buddhist monastery near the town is found murdered. So this throws this tiny little town completely upside down, and Jim gets drawn into the investigation. Could these 2 events have something to do with each other? So with the help of her family and her own special brand of perseverance, she sets off to solve the crime. I wouldn't call this exactly a wacky story. If you like Ivanovich, it's not as extreme as that, but it definitely has the elements of a caper. There's nothing to compare with Stephanie Plum. And the hijinks are definitely absurd and a little weird and certainly unconventional. But the cast of characters is very lovable and very memorable. If you combine that with Cotterill's really solid literary writing and his genuine grasp of what real life in Thailand is right now, I think you get a wonderful mix. This is, as I said, this is the first book in the series. The second one is called Granddad, There's a Head on the Beach. And the third one is called The Axe Factor. Another read-alike that I might suggest, although again, this is a bit more serious than that, but if you've read any of Lisa Lutz's Spellman Files novels, this takes itself more seriously than that. But the dynamic of the funky family and all the weird family dynamics, I think is very much present in these. So I think if you like that, you would also enjoy this while taking you to the other side of the world. So again, that's Killed at the Whim of a Hat by Colin Cotterill.
Thanks, Jeff. Karen?
Okay, back to the apocalypse. So my next book is called The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. And this is a zombie apocalypse book, but I don't want that to stop you from reading it. I have to say, I have never had any interest in zombie books, zombie movies, zombie anything. So the fact that I am recommending this so highly is nothing short of a miracle, really. So why am I recommending it? Well, the first reason is the story itself. It's page-turning, fast-paced plot, basically a road movie in book form. Tinged with a sort of hint of comic book sensibility, which comes from Carey's other life as a graphic novelist, and full of twists and turns, all of the twists and turns that a world of unthinking flesh eaters and lawless humans would, of course, bring. All of it intense and suspenseful, and sometimes violent, as you would also expect. Although I will say that the violence is definitely limited to only what the story demands, which I, for one, was very grateful for. And besides the story, Carey builds a great world. It's all set in post-zombie apocalypse Britain. So the characters are fleeing through the sort of newly wild countryside with the wildflowers and the trees taking over everything. And later they end up in spookily lifeless London, which you can imagine is a great place for zombies to be hanging around every corner.
It's the nightlife.
It's the nightlife. England, the kind of green and pleasant land of England is now almost empty of the living. Except for the Junkers, who are human survivors who cover themselves in tar to block the scent of hungries, as the zombies are called. The Junkers are the sort of few remaining humans who have chosen to live outside the walled city of Beacon, which I think is probably Brighton or something, down in the south. And the Junkers live very sort of violently off the land, killing hungries and whatever else gets in their way. And then there are the hungries themselves, incapable of thought because of the fungus that has overtaken their brains, left standing motionless, alone or in groups, in dark corners or out in the open, wherever their last feed ended, waiting for days, weeks, months, until the next scent, movement, or sound alerts them to a knee-jerk pursuit of their prey. But all of this you might find in any other zombie apocalypse novel. So again, why this one? There are a few things that set this book apart from the others, and they are the reasons that the critics say things like, so surprising, so warm, and yet so chilling, and tense and fast-paced with a heartwarming tenderness. And you're like, okay, so zombies and a heartwarming tenderness, okay. But that is the fabulous contradiction at the heart of this book. The characters are alive and vibrant and lovable and lifelike and believable, and their loves and hates and passions are at the core of the book. And the zombie threat is really kind of just the exciting backdrop that keeps us all on the edge of our seats while the soap opera goes on in front of you. And it's also a very surprising story because it's built around a love story and not a romantic love story, but the intense love of a parentless child, Melanie, the girl with all the gifts, for her teacher, Miss Justineau, who has inspired this orphaned, lonely, uncannily smart child, not just to a love of learning, but to the pure, unthinking love of a child for a parent. The horrifying kicker, of course, is that if Melanie gets too close to her beloved Miss Justineau when the teacher's scent blocker has worn off, then Melanie desperately, urgently, unthinkingly wants to eat her. So who is this girl with all the gifts, and who are the few other children like her, both human and fungus, but not totally either? What do these children mean for the future of the world? Is their intelligence and humanity enough to redeem them? Or are they just sort of specimens to be studied along the way to a cure for zombieism? The brilliance of The Girl with All the Gifts is the way that Carrie explores these deep questions about the nature of humanity while creating characters that we love and keeping us on the edge of our seats in the land of the zombie apocalypse. And so therefore I highly recommend The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey.
I have to say, I read it this weekend because I was kind of in the mood for a heartwarming zombie.
We're in the mood.
And I totally second everything. I have no interest in that kind of stuff, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Couldn't put it down.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Beth?
So my books are, again, Sicilian books. In my search for nonfiction, non-guidebooks about Sicily, I found quite a variety. There is one about a social reformer who had to battle with the Sicilian bureaucracy and the Sicilian mafia, who are often entangled together. There was another one about an orphan who grew up in a cloistered nunnery and ran her own successful pastry shop. And there are also a number written by women about their various sojourns there. Stone Boudoir by Teresa Maggio is one of the latter books. Born in America of Sicilian grandparents, she goes over to explore her heritage. This heritage gives her a unique perspective, both of an insider with Sicilian grandparents and other extended family, as well as being an American. She visits all the small towns and villages in Italy, in Sicily. She explores the small towns and villages all over the island, such as Paluzzo Generosa, which means generous police. How did the village get that name? Nobody knows, so she tells you what the myth is. She'll tell you she's interested in the everyday lives of the people she meets and the challenges they face, especially the women. Written a little over 10 years ago, she talks about one village who has trouble with a woman owning her own business. Maggio's lyrical prose evokes sumptuous cuisine. Her favorite panino? Pecorino cheese, pickled peppers, capers, and tomato on fragrant yellow bread, chewy as steak, and smeared with olive oil.
Olives.
Sicily is very good olives.
Yep.
And her description of scenery with the same beautiful tones. Her character sketches render intriguing personalities, some highly eccentric. And the events she participates in, from the 3-day and night Festival of St. Agatha to the eruption of Mount Etna with the lava flowing down the hillside to cover a hillside and a vineyard. You can feel the warmth she has for the people and they for her, and yet she doesn't romanticize them. She has woven together a compelling vision of Sicilian culture. Read-alikes for this would be A House in Sicily by Daphne Phillips, Sicilian Odyssey by Francine Prose, and Persephone's Island by Mary Taylor Simonetti. Again, Stone Bourgeois.
Thank you, Beth. Christine? For the second book I want to talk about today, I decided to go nonfiction, and this was, I would say, easily one of the favorite of my books that I read this year, just like Leanne's favorites. And I loved this book, particularly I would recommend it to anybody who really loves a book that gives them other things to read, which I do. And this book is called How to Be a Heroine, or What I've Learned from Reading Too Much by Samantha Ellis. Yeah, I loved it. And this book starts off with a trip to England that Samantha takes with her best friend, during which she has, as she puts it, her world turned upside down during an argument that the two women have over two of the most famous literary heroines of all time, being Cathy Earnshaw from Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre from Jane Eyre. And the issue is that Samantha Ellis has always aspired to be a Cathy Earnshaw, and she has this epiphany during this argument that she should have been an aspiring Jane Eyre instead. And as she puts it in the book, if I'd been wrong about Cathy, had I been wrong about my other heroines too? Once I'd asked that terrifying question, I knew I would have to meet all my heroines again, every last one. I wanted to think about what they meant to me when I was growing up and what they mean to me now that I am a grown-up and a playwright and writing heroines of my own. This epiphany prompts a journey of retrospection, and she literally does what she says. She revisits every single heroine that she loved as a child and the authors that dreamed them up. And she sort of starts in the book chronologically, so she starts with the things that she read when she was the youngest, and then she works her way up to the things that she read as an adolescent. And she approaches each book with adult eyes, and she thinks each time, and she examines how each heroine shaped who she became as a woman. This is particularly interesting in this book because I think this has been done before, but what makes this particularly interesting in Ellis's case is that she grew up in a community of very conservative Iraqi Jews transplanted in London, England. And that makes this particularly fascinating because what she's talking about in the book, particularly the parts that are sort of a memoir, is her own confusion and vulnerability as a child growing up in a community where options for women were very, very narrow. And books really provided another template for her as a child. You know, she realized by reading that she could grow up and be a wife and mother, yes, but she could also be an adventurer, an activist, and most importantly, a writer. You know, the strict standards and rules of her community were very difficult to navigate. And books also sort of inspire her to be a little bit more defiant of some of those rules. As she re-examines these books, Samantha Ellis is the first to say that some of these heroines don't quite hold up to rereading. For instance, with adult eyes, she realizes that some of them are very flawed and very much, you know, a result of their own time period as well. So for instance, The Little Mermaid from the Hans Christian Andersen story really like destroys herself for an unworthy prince. She talks about the fact that Anne Shirley and Jo March from Little Women and Anne of Green Gables respectively give up their dreams of writing when they get older. But she points out that there are also heroines like Lizzie Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. There are heroines like Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, who are brave and brazen and really inspire her to be defiant of her parents even and decide that she wants to become a different kind of adult. This book is one part memoir and one part literary criticism, and it's a combination that really works. Any woman who ever buried herself in books as a child can relate to this story. Her unique voice brings stories to life and will inspire readers to embark on their own rereading, I'm certain, and their own